Hello there everyone, welcome to Eosacro. In this video I'm going to take the compositing a little bit further. In the previous videos I've already shown you how to create a simple single layer composite where you're just combining all the passes to just produce one single output like the sphere which we created. But in this video I'm going to composite a background element separately and then a foreground element separately, and then combine those two together and show you what are the elements involved, or what is the technique involved in doing this. The reason I'm trying to show you this beforehand is so that you understand the process involved in going from the background element to the foreground element in a composite. And once you understand this, later on in the probably starting from the next video itself, I'll start by VFX composites, where I'll take live action footages on which 3D elements have to be composited, and I'll show you what is involved when you're trying to get this a realistic look when you're doing this VFX. So first, to begin with, as you can see on the screen, I have this composite already created. This is the output that we are trying to achieve, and I'm going to show you how to get this done. So let's get started. I'm here with a blank canvas in Nuke, and I'll start by importing my image. The image is sphere_bg exr file with several passes inside it. I'll be linking this image down on the video in the comments section, so you can get a copy for yourself while working with this. So let me just connect this into the viewer and show you all the passes which are involved within it. As you can see, it has a default RGB pass which is composited straight out of the 3D package. Now apart from this, we also have the alpha, which is completely flat because the entire scene is basically covered by 3D objects, so there is no actual shortage of alpha. Whereas let's say the camera has movement and you go about somewhere and then you actually see the horizon or the line which cuts off the 3D element, in such a case you will have some alpha channel. So for that reason I have just left it in there. I haven't deleted that one. Apart from that, we have the depth channel. And as you can see, there is some variation. There is a red color at the background, and then it comes forward and shows the sphere, and completely it has a depth information. It is only in the red channel right now because it's not actually connected into anything. It's a single channel. I can connect it to Z depth channel over here and then achieve the exact result, the black and white result, by just setting my alpha channel. So this is my depth. Now apart from depth, I also have my plane ambient occlusion. This is ambient occlusion which is only related to the background image. As you can see, the sphere is completely black, but the ambient occlusion is present only in the plane here at the bottom. Plus this entire values for the ambient occlusion is in float point, so I can actually go ahead and grade it or color correct it, so I have more ambient occlusion or less, or just use curves to achieve different results. So that's kind of important. Apart from that, we have the color for the plane itself. One thing to note here, I did not see this when I created this in the 3D package. This is actually a procedural texture that I have created, but as you can see, there is some kind of a repeat that is happening in the texture, which is like creating these striations in the texture in the final look, which is not a really good thing to have when you're trying to create natural scenes, because you don't usually have patterns which go about so easily, which are so easily recognized in the natural world. So that is one thing I should have taken care of, but it's done. So apart from that, we have the diffuse lighting for the plane itself. This is a combination of the key light and the fill light together, whereas I also have separate passes if you have to edit them separately. Apart from that, I have the plane's indirect lighting. The plane is lit by the let's say the environment. It could be the sky, it could be anything which is lighting the entire plane, and then we have the sphere itself which is lighting only this part of the plane. So we are going to use this in the composite too. Next, we have the plane matte. This is only the matte related to the plane. Wherever the plane is seen, it gives us the white color, and wherever the sphere is there, it's just giving us a black color. So we'll be using that too. Apart from that, we have the plane reflection. Here we have just the reflection that the plane is casting, or the plane is catching from the scene. As you can see, there are loads of reflections and details over here, and also it's catching the sphere itself. If I zoom in a lot, you can actually see the noise in the reflections. This is because of samplings. I can increase the samplings to get rid of this noise, but just for this purpose I don't really care if I have a lot of noise, because anyway the reflection is not going to be 100%, so you can't really see the difference there. Next, this is the plain direct lighting which we have. Previously which I had is plain complete lighting with the fill and the key light, whereas here I just had the fill direct lighting, then I have the fill shadow, the lighting, the shadow which is cast by the fill light. As you can see, this this basic shadow pass which I have has complete RGB channels. It's not it doesn't actually have any kind of information about any alpha channels here. The reason for that being we can easily color correct or composite this on top, and also let's say there is some other detail in the shadow and you can try to get that in. So I've just left it as it is without trying to remove the RGB passes and creating an alpha channel. So apart from that, we have a direct lighting for the plane, the key, and the shadow which is cast by the key light itself. Then again we have the sphere's ambient occlusion and so on, just for the sphere too. So I'll just quickly go through all the passes which I have for the sphere. This is the color, the direct lighting, the incidence. This is one pass I just want to talk about for a minute. I'll just put it into the proper channels. So this is the sphere incidence. So this pass basically gives me a fall off about how the surface is facing the camera. So if a surface is actually facing the camera, it's giving me black color over there, and if a surface is facing away from the camera, it's giving me a white color over there. This is useful when trying to create Fresnel type reflections. Just one thing to note here, when you're trying to create Fresnel reflections using this method, it's just your artistic liberty which you have. You can't actually try to create photorealistic or mathematically accurate Fresnel reflections just by using this. You need to plug in your refractive index of the material into the 3D package so you can get the actual values. But for this demo, I'm just leaving it as it is. I'm not going into any technical detail. Now we have the indirect, the sphere's matte itself, the sphere reflection. This is a 100% reflection which the sphere is catching. It is not it does not have any fall off or anything as such. So this one can be tweaked as much as we want, or however we want to get the result. Next we have the sphere direct lighting, and of course the end, the key. So these are all the different passes, and we are going to try and composite them together. So there are two steps involved in this, two major steps involved. So the first step is trying to create a composite for the BG. I'll tell you why exactly it's important to create the BG beforehand later on, but first we are going to finish up with the background element, and then we are going into the foreground element, which is actually the sphere itself. So to start up with, first I'll create my shuffle copy which I did in the previous one. This is going to be my main node which I'm going to start using to create the background element. And as you can see, for the background especially, I have my plane direct, which is basically my entire direct lighting on the plane itself. I can start using this itself. So let me start from there itself. I'll connect this in, and just to make it more easier for me, I had it on the side, and in the shuffle I'm just going to select plane direct, and it has been shuffled inside. If I go back to my RGB, as you can see, it is just giving me my plane direct. So I'll just call it, this is my plane direct pass, and that is done. And just to make sure that I'm working only with the BG composite in this area, I'll just make a selection here, and I'll add a backdrop on that. I'll just increase the size of this backdrop so that I know exactly, like, okay, all the nodes which I'm putting in here belong only to whatever things are happening with the plane. So I'll just rename this one. So you can follow any color convention which you have about the backdrop itself. I'm just going to use my same old color conventions for this. So green usually refers to any kind of a node which is the input, or the final node which is coming out as an output for my composite. So I'm using the same notations. So I have my my plane direct completed. Now I'm directly going to apply color on top of this. So to do that, I'm going to apply a merge node over here on the direct, and because the A pipe is connected by default, I'm going to press Shift X, shift it to B, take the A, connect it back here, and just break it apart to just make sure it looks better. So I haven't merged, but it's not merging the color pass right now. It's actually merging the RGBA from the original image. So just to make sure it's the right one, I'm just going to take the A channel over here and shift it to plain color. And next thing I want to do is I want to multiply the color on top of the diffuse rather than overlay it. So I'm going to change this blend operation from over to multiply. So immediately you can see that the plane has the diffuse applied on top of the color, and then I have some results. So this is done. Now as you have seen before, I had this additional passes for this key direct and fill direct for the plane itself. So I'm going to show you how to use them later on. So right now I'm just going to finish the composite. Now once I have this merge which has been completed, this is only the color pass, and I have this. Now next I want to do is add in the shadows, or basically make the things darker, as I mentioned before. So to do that, I can use the merge node, or I can use the grade node. I've been using the grade node for a long time now, so I'll just use the grade node for one shadow and the merge node for another, so you are aware of any method which you can use. So I'm taking the merge node and I'm applying the I'm just connecting the channels right, and then for the A channel, I'm just going to tell that I'm going to add in let's say ambient occlusion. So I'm just going to come into the A channel, set it to plain ambient occlusion, and set it on multiply. So my ambient occlusion is applied onto the plane. You can just see the results, and as you can see, the sphere itself, which is a perfect pitch black hole in the ambient occlusion matte, is just giving me that a pitch black hole because it's completely black. It's going to give us a problem later on down the lane, but I'll show you how exactly we can use Unpremultiply to get rid of this artifact or this problem. So till then, let's just finish the composite. I'm going to apply a grade node to this and create my shadow, the first one. So my alpha channel is going to be any of the shadow passes. So let's say I have the plain fill shadow. As you can see, the shadow does not have an alpha channel over here, so I can pretty much choose any R, G or B channel because it is a grayscale image, and for any grayscale image all these three values are the same, so I can just pick any one of them and it would work. So I've just chosen the red channel, and I can just take multiply down, and the effect is too subtle to take note of over here, so I'm just going to take this multiply and actually take it higher up, so you can see the difference that it's creating over here. This lighter area is actually the shadow itself, so I'm just taking it down to 0. I'll just toggle this on and off so you can see the result. So it's a very subtle result that I'm getting over here. It's not really that high, but okay, I have some shadows. If I want, I can edit it later on, but let's say I want to just increase it over here itself. So in such a case, I'm just going to add a grade node right before it goes into the original one. Let me just order this out a little bit. So this grade node is just going to go ahead and grade the shadow over there, and Nuke is really good at handling channels, so I'm just going to set this channel to all to make it easier for myself, and I can actually grade the shadow itself. So I'll go in here, I'm going to choose my key shadow. Hopefully that is the one I've taken here. Okay, this is the fill shadow. So here I'm going to take in the fill shadow, and here the fill shadow. So I'm just looking at this, and as you can see, this is not perfectly white. It just has a value of 0.2 over here at the bottom, so I just need to clip it properly so that it has a perfect black and white value. So for this, I'm going to turn on my out of gamut warning over here, and I'm going to take the white point and start taking it downwards. As you can see, it starts creating a brighter value. I'm going to stop it as soon as it creates any of that striping or the warning for out of gamut. So now what I have is something which is going to give me perfect white, and then I of course have perfect black here. So this is perfectly graded. Now I can go back to my final output and go to my RGBA, and as you can see, the shadow is much more harder. You can easily see the results. I will just turn this grade which I've added on the shadow, and you can see that the result is really different. So that is one thing. That is one shadow completed. Now the other way that I'm going to merge the shadow is going to be with the help of the merge node. So let me just first create a merge node. I'll connect it. I'll connect the background to the original background pipe that I have. Now I'm not going to actually connect the foreground element to the original source which I have. Instead, I'm going to take a constant. This constant is going to be my actual shadow, and I'm just going to give it a color of black, complete black. This is going to be my foreground element. I'm just connecting it to the foreground, and if I come to the merge, what you will see is nothing happened because it's on over, but shadows usually have to be multiplied because they darken the scene. I'm going to set this to multiply, and as soon as I do that, because a constant is perfectly black, it's going to remove all the value from the entire scene. But what I want is basically only the key light's shadow. So what I can do is take the mask from the merge and connect that to my source, and using this I can just set it to my key shadow, of course any channel, any sub channel from the key shadow, and as soon as I do that, you can see the shadow has come in. I'll just toggle it on and off. The shadow has come in. The only difference is I'm using a different layer to create this shadow. Now this might seem to be kind of an awkward way of creating the shadow, but it's also a very useful method. The reason being that I can actually take this constant and I can give it any color I want. So let's say I wanted the shadow to be red, I can just give it a red color and my shadow is red. So as easy as that, I have a huge thumbnail which tells me what is the exact color of my shadow. But also another method of using this is, let's say I actually do have a composite in which the shadow is not the actual color, or it's just not darker compared to everything else, or you have to color correct or do some kind of a special edit on the footage itself to get the shadow. In such a case, I can easily add another image or another node here to get the shadow. So I'll just show you what I mean by that. Instead of the constant, I'm going to replace it with a checkerboard. So as soon as I replace that, you can see that the checkerboard has come in. Just to make sure the details are seen, I'm going to increase the scale over here. Okay, it's really huge. Okay, let me just go. Okay, I'm making it larger. Okay, so back to the final. As you can see here, I have loads of these values which are coming in, and of course the actual checkerboard which I have is not as big as my actual comp. So I'm just going to come in here and select the comp resolution so that my checkerboard is exactly the same size. And as you can see, instead of the actual shadow, I have a checkerboard which is coming in there. So this is a useful method of adding in details in areas if you already have an image or a backdrop which you want to use. So this was one method I just wanted to show real quick. So I'll just connect back the red output, and I'm just going to change the color back to black. And I don't really need this thumbnail view of the whole thing, so I'm going into node and I'll turn off postage stamp. So by turning this off, I'm gonna lose the stamp. I'm just going to call this my shadow. This is just for reference. I'll just keep it here on the side. So as you can see, I used a grade node, which was much more easier than to use the multiply node. But of course, multiply node also has its own advantages, of course, if we use it right. So this one is done. Now let's see which other passes are there which are going to make things darker. So 2 of our shadows are done. We have not added our reflections or indirect yet. We already added ambient occlusion, so we are supposed to just make everything lighter now. So let me start by making things lighter. I'm just going to take my merge node again. Foreground goes in there. And now I'm going to start by adding the reflections. So my A channel goes into reflections for the plane. Reflections, I'm just going to connect that in, and as you can see, reflections have come in. Only I don't want the operation to be over. I need it to be plus or screen, so I'm putting it into screen, and you can see the reflections are coming from the sphere. If I want to dial down the reflection, I can use the mix amount here at the bottom, and as you can see, even the shadow area which is there, by taking the mix down, I just have the black area which is coming in. Basically, by making the shadow completely black, I've lost a lot of detail. So I can just come back to this grade node, take this white up a little bit so I get back a little bit of that detail. The reason for that is because I can always grade it to becoming perfectly black, but I can never get back the detail. I can never ungrade it once it's done. So, or unclamp it, sorry, once it's done. So I've just got that back. Next I want to add in my indirect. So this is my another merge. Connecting it there, shifting it across. And now I'm going to select my plane indirect from here and of course add it on screen. So once that is done, you can see there is a lot of lighting information which has come in because of that. Now if I want, I can go ahead and start grading it so that I have a lot of detail which is going across this. So let's say this is my final comp for the background. I'm just going to come in, add a grade node in the end, and this grade node I'm just going to turn on out of gamut warning here at the top, and now I'm going to start clamping black from the top. So when I start clamping this, you can see it's turning black, but I don't get any warning as such because black clamp is already turned on. I'm going to turn it off so I can actually see the warning. So now I'm going to go ahead and set it to that value which is going to give me the least amount of clamping. I don't really care about the spear because this area is not really required. What I'm looking for is the outer region, and as you can see, this region here easily gets clamped, so I don't want that. I'm just keeping it a little bit lighter than the clamp value. So that is my black value, black point. I'm going to take the white and I'm going to start decreasing it till I get some results in there. Okay, so looks like white cannot be graded that much in here. So that is done. Now if I want, I can use the other values in here. I can add another color correct node. I increase the contrast to get in more details into the scene. But let's say this is done, and if it's a image sequence rather than a single image, I would actually go ahead, see the different frames and see exactly how it interacts, or how exactly this is giving me the result in the end. So let's say this is done. This is my final. Now there's only one problem with this entire composite, and that is if I come back to the edge, as you can see, I'm having an edge over here from the spear which does not actually exist in my scene, and that is going to give me a lot of problems. I don't really want the spear to create a problem later on. So instead of actually trying to demo it, I'm going to create the foreground composite and then start showing you exactly how to create correct this problem. So let me just take it up, and I'll create another comp here on the side. I can just take this entire comp, duplicate it, just reconnect everything properly to the right channel, so I have a completely done composite. I'll just take this entire one, copy it, put it onto the side, and just by connecting it back here, I basically have a duplicate of the entire composite, but of course I want it to be the foreground composite, not the background. So let me go back to the grade here at the bottom. So you can see it's exactly the same. I'll come back to the P direct. I'll call it the S direct for the spear, and I'm going to go select the spear direct. You can see suddenly things have changed. Next, I'm coming down to this multiply. It's the plain color. Instead, I'm going to choose the spear color. So that is done. Next, I'm coming down to plane ambient occlusion. I'm going to change it to spear ambient occlusion. Immediately you can see there are loads of results. So because it was the ambient occlusion which was creating that artifact, that black area, it's completely gone, so it's gotten rid of it. Next, I have the grade node here, and this grade node is using the fill shadow, the plane fill shadow. Instead, I want the spear fill shadow, so I'll just come in here and see where exactly I have the shadow for that. And as you can see, the spear doesn't actually have a shadow pass attached to it because the diffuse itself is taking care of all of that shading on top of it. So I'm just going to disable these nodes which are giving me the shadows on top of it. Next, I'm going to come down. This is my plane reflection. I'm going to change it to spear reflection. Okay, so as you can see, reflections from the outside have gone into the spear itself. Next, I'm going to come down to the indirect. I'm going to change it to spear indirect. So as you can see, this is only my foreground element. All the background is gone. This is basically the out of gamut clamp. So I have this simple image which is created, and this one can be easily composited on top of anything because I already have a matte for both of these. So this is one result, and as you saw how easy it is to create another result by just copying the entire network which you already have. So this is done. I'll just recolor this so I know exactly these are the final ones. And if you just notice, I'm not really that keen in creating like I'm not really renaming every single thing. That is because of course you can rename them, it is much easier, but when you're working on something as short as this, it's really not that let's say long-term use to actually go ahead and rename each and everything, because this is something which is very simple and easy to recreate. So this is supposed to be my final for the background elements, and this is the final for the foreground elements. All I'm going to do is merge these two together. So I'm just hitting M to create the merge. I just selected them in the wrong order, because of which this has become my foreground element A and this has become my background element B. I'm going to shift them across by Shift X, so they are shifted across. So now you can see there are some results. Now the only thing I want to test out is to see whether or not this result is coming in from here, or is it using the actual RGBA pass which came in from the original node on top. So to check that, I'm just going to come down to this final. I'm going to select any node on top of this and disable it and enable it. So you can see reflections are going off only in the background and not on the sphere. So that is done. Next, I do the same thing on the sphere, and you can see that it's affecting only the sphere and nothing else. So yes, this is a beautiful composite. I was able to create it very easily, and it didn't take a lot of effort to actually get this done. So now, last thing I'm going to take a note of is if I come to the edge of the sphere, as I've done previously, this unpremultiply and premultiply is always going to give you some of the other issues. So I'm going to come back to my original footage which I had, and I'm putting it in. As you can see, there is a huge difference. There's a huge difference, and there's a dark line which is being created on both of these. So I really want to get rid of that dark line. I don't really want to be using that at all. And also one thing to note, as you can see, the specular highlights on my sphere are missing. That is because by mistake I did not take the specular passes from the sphere, but it's really not an issue. I'm just trying to demo this for now, so I've just left it as it is. And also you can see the shadows are different. That is because I've graded a different shadow here, and I've kept a different shadow than what is there in the final composite. That is easily something which you can easily change, so I'm not going to bother about it. What I'm going to instead show you is how exactly you can get rid of this line. So I'm going to spend some time on unpremultiply and premultiply and try to make it even more easier to understand this time. So just hang in with me, because it's going to be a bit of crazy journey for now, for the next couple of minutes. So let's see exactly how to get rid of this artifact. So to get rid of it, first you have to start by understanding why exactly it's being created. So let me come back to the sphere in the direct, and as you can see, there is no sphere in the planes direct pass, and this is definitely not going to give me that final result where I had that edge. So I'm going to ignore this one. I'm going to come down to the next, and as you can see, there is nothing over here too about the sphere, so I can ignore this one too, because it's going to give me a clean plate. I'm coming down to the next one, and here as you can see, I definitely have the sphere coming in, and it is giving me a multiplication value of black everywhere on this edge. And I don't want that edge, because the sphere is not supposed to be here, and this is a halfway transparent region. I don't really want the sphere over there. So for that region, I'm going to unpremultiply it, so to get rid of this black area basically, right? So for this, all I need to do is, before this multiply which is being applied, I'm going to apply a unpremultiply node, and this one is going right before it, because this is the one which is being premultiplied. I'm going to go select the channel which I want divided. So the channel here is going to be the plane ambient occlusion. So I'm just selecting plane ambient occlusion to be the one being affected, and then I want it to be unpremultiplied, but I want it unpremultiplied by a channel which is only giving me the values which is related to the plane and not the sphere. So let's see which channel is giving me such a thing. If I go to my plane matte, you can see that it's giving me only the plane and not the sphere. So this is the matte which is related to the plane, so I need to use the same matte. So I'll come back in here, I can use any one of the subchannels of the plane matte, and once it's selected, it's already been divided. I'll go back to my RGB pass. If I zoom in, you can see that the result looks a bit awkward. It's kind of jagged edged, but it's the best result you can hope for right now. So let me just disable and enable this to show you what happened. If I disable it, you can see that the black is cutting into the plane itself, and now once it's unpremultiplied, I got back the details on the plane. So this is what I want. I want all the details on the plane, and this region is anyway going to be replaced, so I don't really care about it. So I left it as it is. So okay, so this is my ambient occlusion and it's done. That one step is done. I want to go to the next one. Here is a grade where the shadow is being applied, so I'll go to this one and I'll just disable the ambient occlusion which I've created here just quickly. So as you can see, this grade is basically giving me a shadow, and it's not being cut off by the sphere itself. If it was being cut off by the sphere, then I would have to unpremultiply that too, but instead here I don't have any sphere over there, so I can easily use it. But instead, let's say by chance or by mistake you do unpremultiply it, so I'm just going to select this node. I'm just going to connect it to the unpremultiply. Just make sure I set it to all. So here you can see the kind of error that you're getting. So I don't really want any kind of these artifacts to be created when I'm trying to create a composite. So that's the reason I have to make sure that I'm always sticking to the right nodes. So only work on things which are giving you problems, and don't try to create clear problems where it's not necessary, because it'll just add in extra, right? So next I'll just come down to this multiply here at the bottom, and as you can see, it is still not being cut by the sphere itself, so that too is fine. I'll come down to the next one, which is reflection, and as you can see, reflection is giving me some kind of a hollowed out effect, meaning wherever I have the sphere, it's giving me this hollowed out feeling. So I want to unpremultiply reflections too to get the best results possible. So I'm just going to take this unpremultiply, copy, I'll paste it down here into my reflections, and I'm just going to change it from plane ambient occlusion to plane reflections. So now, as you can easily see, as soon as I change it to plane reflection, it just created that extra area, or just clipped it in towards the sphere itself, so that I have more detail. So if I just enable and disable this unpremult, you can see that it added in extra values into the reflection. So that's what I was looking for. So that is done. And next I have the, which pass is this? This is the plane indirect, and if you see the indirect pass directly, okay, you can see that it's not being hollowed out by the sphere, so it's a good pass. I don't really have to unpremultiply it or anything as such. So this is my final background plate, which is completely processed, and basically has nothing, which is no errors which can't be hidden. So this is a background process plate which I can actually go ahead and start compositing over. So now if I come back to my final output, you can see there are some errors. It's giving me this white hollowed out effect on the edges. Now if I go back to my original and just toggle between the two, you can see that there is this white outline on everything else which is just being used. The reason for this white outline is because the merge node is still set on over and I've not actually edited it, and I just need to set it to copy so that it gets rid of it. But the copy is not going to actually work is because it doesn't actually have an alpha channel related to the sphere itself. So I'm going to leave it on over for now, so that I can use a mask on the alpha from the alpha channel from the sphere, so I can composite it. I'll just take this mask, connect it to the original stream which is coming in from there. Now this mask is going to be for the sphere itself, so I'll just put it on copy, take it to the mask. I'll set it to sphere matte and any one of the sub channels, red, green or blue, and once I set it, you can immediately see that the mask is working and it just clipped out the sphere in the exact location. So that is done, but as you can see, the ambient occlusion is still giving me some problems on the edges. The pre-multiplication is giving me the problems on the edges. These problems are because of the multiplication values which are here on this tree. I edited all the problems in this tree, but they're not yet edited on this one. So I just need to make sure that I edit all the problems over here too. So let me come back to the first node here. As you can see, this is a black and white node, and if I go to the alpha, you can see there is no alpha here. Let me just go to RGBA. So if I go to the alpha, you can see there is actual alpha channel, but it's actually shaded, so it's not something which is usable. It's not a matte kind of alpha channel which I can use here. So I'm going to ignore this alpha for now. Next, if I come to, let's say, this multiply, you can see it just multiplied all the values on top of this alpha. So as soon as I do that, what happened is this direct itself had this black region and this white region, which is not the exact one. I wanted something which is perfectly white till the edge, so that my matte does all of the work in the background. But whereas by the default right now, whatever I have, this edge is already having the black pre-multiplied values. So first thing is, I'm going to unpremultiply from here itself. So let me just paste in my unpremultiply node, connect it here. And just to make things easier for myself, I'm going to set it to all, so that all my channels are being unpremultiplied at the same time. And this time I'm not going to use a plain matte, I'm going to use a spear matte to do everything. So I'm going to come down and select my spear matte and any one of the channels, and immediately you can see that it grew outwards and it created extra values. So this was the one with alpha with the black colors multiplied, and this is the one with the pure alpha. This is the complete straight alpha which I'm getting in now. So this one is done. Next, I multiplied colors on top, and as you can see, immediately the colors are giving me this problem again, because they have black on the edges and it's still giving me the problem. I'll just copy this node, I'll paste it down. Okay, that just got messed up. Okay, so I've connected it over here, and as you can see, the color also grew out, so I'm getting the entire spear. This is anyway going to have half alpha values on it, so I don't really care about the jagged edges. So that is done. I'll come to the next multiply, and you can see it happened again. So it keeps happening again and again and again, because the alpha is as such. The only time it does not happen is when things are not at the edge. So really, I want this unpremultiplied throughout. I don't really care about it being applied to each and every single node. So as you can see, this one is multiplying things, and then this is screening things. The screen also affects the edge, and I don't want the edge brighter or darker than whatever it's supposed to be. So in such a case, I need to even unpremultiply here, not just when I'm just multiplying it. So for that reason, I'm just going to cut this unpremultiply from there. I'm just going to connect it all the way up here, just before it even comes in and starts creating a composite. And once I do that, you can see the entire spear grew. It created this extra edges, and it created all these extra values for me, and this is what I'm looking for. So easily, just by connecting it here beforehand, I got the entire output. Now the reason I was able to connect the unpremultiply here in the beginning, and I had to do it separately over here in the middle, is because here, when it came to the spear itself, it is embedded in the entire surroundings. Each and every edge of the spear has some pre-multiplied values. So when I looked through the different channels, it was affecting the edges, it was affecting the alpha edges. So I did not want that in any one of the channels, so that's the reason I can connect it here. Whereas in this previous composite, this was being affected only wherever I was adding these specific channels and not everywhere. So if I just add it every single place, even those places which are not being affected by the presence of the spear, then I'll just create artifacts which are not there to begin with. So only for this purpose, only affect things with unpremultiply if it's necessary, only when it's necessary, and not everywhere. So here, instead of adding it at every single junction, I just added it in the beginning, and it's done. So now I'll just come back to my final output here, and as you can see, the edge is beautiful. There is no single error on the edge. I'll go back to the original and just toggle between the two, and as you can see, the edge is exactly the same. Of course, the color in the spear is different because of the specular highlights, but the edge has come out really well. The reason this unpremultiply did not have to be again pre-multiplied here at the bottom is because we are using a mask. If I remove this mask and come back here, you can see that this result is not exactly that good anymore. That is because the mask is the one which was cutting out the entire additional values. So if I go ahead and remove this unpremultiply, I'll just disable it. You can see the black outline. If I enable it, you can get rid of the black outline. So I have seen many compositors, when they try to do some kind of a composite, they usually end up with this black outline, and I see them working with curves, levels, the the matte choker, and every single thing we can possibly think of to get rid of it, whereas it's a simple thing as connecting an unpremultiply node to get rid of it to get a beautiful composite. So that is one very important thing you have to understand. If you haven't understood it, please just go through the video a couple of more times. If you still are not able to understand it, just write me a mail, ask me any kind of questions you have about Unpremultiply. Tell me exactly where you're getting stuck, so that I'll just address that issue. I'll probably create a completely new video just so that you understand what Unpremultiply does. But I really hope that this video kind of clarified what Unpremultiply is for most of you. So with that one done, I'll just finish it up by showing you how exactly you can use the incidence pass to affect the reflections on the sphere. So if I come down here, you can see the sphere reflection is being added onto the sphere over here, whereas I already have this sphere incidence pass, which is giving me this fall off effect for creating this Fresnel kind of a reflection pass. For those of you who don't know what Fresnel reflection is, it basically means that when objects are facing you, or the surface is facing you, the reflections are not as hard or not as bright as when the object is facing away from you. You might have observed this effect with a plank of glass. Like if you have a blank glass and you're staring right at it, you can't actually see the reflections as easily, but as soon as the glass is on the side, or you're looking at the glass from a slanting angle, the reflections increase. For those of you who do a lot of window shopping, you know that you have to stand right in front of the glass to be able to look at what's behind the glass easily, than compared to standing on the side, because it'll just reflect what's there on the streets. So we're going to try and create that effect using the Fresnel reflections. So to do that, I'm in my node here, which is for the reflection, and I'm going to use this incidence as a mask to affect it. So to do this, I'm just going to take the mask input and I'm going to connect it to my input, which is coming in from the original source. And here in the input, I'm going to change it to sphere incidence. As you can see, it only has one channel, which is the alpha. I'll just connect it there, come back over here and change it to RGB. And as you can see, there is some slight changes in whatever mask is applied. So the mask is doing this. It's removing all the reflections from the front of the sphere and it's carrying it across to the edges. So that is a very useful thing to have. And also one more thing you can note here, as the edges over here, they are shrunk down, and you can see they have some kind of an alpha applied to them. That is because all the channels get applied on Premultiply, but not the alpha channel by default. So anyway, for this example, it's not going to matter much, so I'm going to leave it as such. So this alpha channel is coming in and it's masking this reflection out, and now what I'm going to do is affect the alpha channel so that I'm getting reflections properly over here in the center and on the edge. So to do that, I'm going to take a simple grade node again, connect it over here on the top, and here using the grade node I can just make sure it affects all channels so that I don't have to select which channel it has to edit. And now I can take it up with a black so that I am removing all the reflections. As you can see, the reflections goes off to the side. I can set it how much ever I want, or I can take it down so that I increase the reflection in the center. So I can set it to any amount which gives me some reflections in the center, and then I can take the white point, take it how much ever I want to actually affect the entire reflections itself. So let's say I have some amount of reflections that I actually like. I can leave it as it is at that point. I can come down to the final composite, and that's what I have. I've just reduced the entire reflections on the sphere, that too using Fresnel reflection kind of properties. And now let's say this is done, you're good with this, but this is not exactly what you were looking for. You actually wanted more or less reflection, or you want the transition to be different. In such a case, you can actually use the gamma curve to edit the transition itself to make it linear or smooth and get different results. So it's all up to you on how exactly you can think of. It's of course a creative thing, so take your liberty, just go ahead and try to see what exactly you can achieve. So this is a composite that I wanted to create, I really hope you understood all the different things which went about in creating this composite. And this is the final node, and by default my convention is all the nodes at the bottom and the right side are the final ones, so I'm going to keep it here on the side, and just making sure that if I come back to this node later on, I know exactly that this is my final output. So I'll just recolor it. So this is my final, and just to make sure that I know what is the result from here, I can go down to the node and make sure I have postage stamp turned on, so that I know that okay, this is the output which I'm getting out from this node. So this is a composite we created. We created a separate composite for the background elements, we created a separate composite for the foreground elements, and then we combined them together to create the final one. So of course we have the grade nodes which we can affect. We can color correct each and any step over here involved in the process to get any kind of an output we want, just to make sure you understand that whatever demo I've just given is to let you understand the concept involved in trying to create this composite. It does not mean this is the only way to create it. Just go ahead, test it out, see what you can create, and of course if you just work on it a little while, you can actually make this composite itself look a lot better. So I really hope you understood this video. Thank you for going through it. If you have any suggestions, just put it in the comment section. Now apart from this, the next video onwards, I'll be creating VFX shots where I'm going to take in a couple of footages. I'm going to create some 3D elements which had to be composited on top of the live footage, and then I'll create a demo video where I'll show you the entire process involved in creating that composite. So it's going to take a little bit of my time to actually go about and get these things done in my free time. So the next video will be after a couple of more days. But till then, I really hope you have gone through these videos and have understood all the steps involved, so that once I get into creating the VFX composite, you can follow along easily. So for now, that's it. I really hope you understood everything from this one, and thank you for watching this, and goodbye.